Folks, thank you for joining. Welcome to the July NetBox community call. My name is Jeremy Stretch. I'm the founder and the lead maintainer of the NetBox open source project and the chief NetBox officer here at NetBox Labs. With me today, I've got Maggie and Kylie who'll be helping out from the NetBox Labs team. Thank you everyone for joining. Let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, actually, I should mention this is our first time using this new webinar format, so I'll apologize in advance if we run into any snafus with unmuting people and that. So please bear with us as we try to adapt to the new platform. Thanks. All right, this month we'll be covering, as always, upcoming events. So things to look forward to in August, as well as the upcoming NetBox 4.1 release. We'll get into some details there. And joining us this month, we have Eric Pearce from Nutanix to showcase some of his content. And yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, first off, coming up in August, we've got some really exciting stuff. Leading the month will be automating network monitoring with NetBox and Icingo. So if you're an Icingo user, if you use that network monitoring system, we'll be looking at different ways to integrate that with NetBox. That promises to be very valuable if you're an Icingo user or considering using Icingo. We'll also talk about later in the month using the certified collection Red Hat's certified collection for Ansible plugins using NetBox as an inventory system. So we can we'll have some examples of working through that. On the 20th, Rich Bibby will be leading a free course on just NetBox basics. So if you're just getting started with NetBox, if you're a new user, we'll walk through some of the fundamentals, understanding the data model, common workflows, all that good stuff. So don't miss that. A lot of good information there that'll help you get ramped up very quickly. And finally, probably some of the most interesting or the most in-demand content that we've had recently. We will be introducing branching and change management that's coming to NetBox 4.1 on August 27th. I don't think we have a link for that one just yet, so keep an eye out for our X or Twitter and the netboxlabs.com blog for further details there. But really, we're going to be showcasing some of the new functionality that's coming out in the form of a couple plugins for NetBox 4.1 that will allow people to essentially introduce change management workflows through kind of a Git style branching in NetBox. So really exciting stuff there. I'll mention a little bit more about that as we talk about NetBox 4.1. But that will, for details on that, obviously we're going to be demoing that on the 27th. So don't miss that. Right, getting into NetBox 4.1 features. So a lot of good stuff coming around here. As you may or may not know, the release cadence for NetBox is to release a new minor or major version every 4 months, every 4 calendar months. So NetBox 4.1 is due out in September, and we're packing a lot of cool stuff in here. Circuit groups leading the pack here. This has been something that's been in demand for a while. It's the ability to correlate provider circuits by group and optionally assign a priority within that group. So for example, if you've got a site that has, say, 3 internet connections, you can deliver through 3 different providers for diversity. You can group them as belonging to that site and optionally assign priorities. So like primary, secondary, tertiary for those individual circuits just for correlation. So I know a lot of people have been asking about that for a while. Rack types is another one. So you may recall in NetBox, we have this concept of device types, which is sort of a template for deploying a device, right? So you define your unique make and model of different network equipment, and then you instantiate that. So like you might have a Juniper EX4200 or what have you, and then you as a device type, and then you create instances of that device type and automatically populates all your interfaces and console ports and so forth. The concept of rack types very closely mimics that, where you're going to have a make and model of rack optionally. You can continue to use racks as you have in NetBox for years, but this helps simplify the process and automate it a little bit by allowing users to define a make and model of rack. So that includes things like its height, depth and width, other attributes, physical attributes of that rack, to simplify and standardize things a little bit. Nesting device modules is another one that people have been asking for a long time. So if you have like a Juniper or Cisco router are good examples of things that have submodules. So you might have like a line card, and then within that line card, you have a submodule. Today, there's not a great way of modeling that in NetBox, but NetBox 4.1 will introduce nested modules. So you can actually have modules installed into module bays, which then belong to other modules. That's one of our, I think, most highly demanded features, or has been for some time. So a lot of people will be excited to see that, I'm sure. Something new that we're doing in NetBox 4.1 is user notifications and object subscriptions, subscriptions. So this is the ability to, like, let's say you're doing some work on a device and you want to know whenever someone's making changes to that in NetBox, you can subscribe to that object and then be notified via the UI whenever changes are made to that object. This notifications framework is new. The subscriptions, the individual object subscriptions are a part of that. We also have the ability to automate notifications using event rules. So you could say, whenever a specific event happens, notify the following users. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of use cases for that. It's a very flexible implementation. And we'll continue to see other use cases for the new notifications framework as well, I'm sure. On the plugins front, we have a lot of cool stuff coming up as well. So owing to, like I just talked about, the notifications framework, plugins will be able to register their own custom event types to utilize that framework. So for example, let's say you've got a plugin that is, I don't know, synchronizing data from a remote system somewhere, doing something, maybe as a background job. And you want to be notified when that process is completed. Your plugin can then create notifications that say, oh, whoever started this process, go send them a notification letting them know it's done. So we're unlocking a lot of new functionality there, so I'm pretty excited about that. I mentioned background jobs. So plugins have been able to use background jobs sort of like unofficially for a while now, but thanks to the work of Alexander Haza, I hope I'm saying that name correctly. He's been doing a lot of great work around kind of solidifying that process, adding the documentation and testing and so forth that's needed to make plugins like jobs rather, first-class citizens of the plugins API, and in doing so also simplifying the process of creating and managing jobs. So that's a substantial amount of functionality being introduced as well for plugins. And we've got some other miscellaneous extensions around allowing plugins to inject or to embed custom content in different views, like embedding alerts above objects for different reasons and so forth. So a lot of good stuff coming with plugins. And as far as using plugins, we're now introducing an integration with the plugins catalog. So you may recall that we've talked about it in previous calls and in the newsletter for sure. The plugins catalog that NetBox Labs maintains. So this is a kind of a canonical source to look at to find out what NetBox plugins exist out there in the world, right? Open source typically. So it's kind of, I guess the simplest analogy is something like a Python package index, but for NetBox plugins. So now we're integrating with directly within the NetBox UI. So in addition to seeing obviously your own installed plugins, you can also see plugins that are available upstream that you may opt to install. So again, just a lot of solid work around the foundations for plugins. And finally, you may remember that in NetBox 4.0, we obviously revamped the user interface quite a bit by moving from some very outdated like Bootstrap CSS into the new Tabular theme and framework, and just kind of refreshing the UI. That work continues. We're continuing to improve and mature the brand and the theming around NetBox. So you'll see some iterative changes in that regard as well. Looking at timing, so again, I mentioned, we have our 4-month cycle of releases, the last month of which we dedicate to a beta evaluation period. That's going to be the month of August this time around. So August 5th, we're due to release the first beta for NetBox 4.1. So keep an eye out for that. And then in mid-August, we'll typically, after 2 or 3 weeks into the period, we generally release a second beta. We don't normally do a third unless there's a specific reason to do so. But keep an eye out for that as well. Also in mid-August, we intend to have the beta, at least the first beta release of the new branching plugin that I mentioned earlier. We should have that released for public consumption. We're currently doing a invitation-only private preview program of the branching plugin. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, a lot of great ideas. We're continuing to refine that functionality and to improve it as we get the feedback that comes in. And the beta release will be the next iteration of that process. So keep an eye out for that. I know a lot of people are excited to get their hands on it. And then toward the end of the month, actually into September, we anticipate the last release of the last patch release for version 4.0 should be out around September 1st. Might be a day or two earlier or afterward. And then September 2nd is when we anticipate releasing the final release for version 4.1. So it's coming up very quickly. All right, we can go ahead and get into presentations. Today we have joining us Eric Pearce from Nutanix. I'll read this out loud for anyone who's not able to see their screen at the moment. The synopsis here is how NetBox has transformed their network asset management by centralizing all asset types, utilizing automated crawlers for continuous updates, integrating with major cloud providers, streamlining management, and enhancing efficiency across physical and virtual assets. All right, so that, Eric, I will hand it off to you, sir.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can.
See me? Okay, great. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Eric Pearce, and I'm an IT architect at Nutanix, and I'm coming to you from Mountain View, California. And my colleague, Danko Trukovic, sorry, he is a little still recovering from being sick, so I don't know if he'll be able to speak at all, but he's my primary collaborator with me and wrote the majority of the code that I'm going to talk about. So I think it's useful to give a little bit of history before we get into it. I actually struggled quite a bit to think of, what did we do before we had NetBox? And that's, it's been a few years, but I tried to remember the world before then. And I think it was really, we didn't have central sources of truth. They were kind of per object type, right? One for switches, one for firewalls, or, one for servers. I think a lot of those were based on monitoring systems that became kind of the default database for such information. So like SolarWinds, and I'm sure people remember good old Rancid. I used Nagios quite a bit. That was kind of our world before we adopted it. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to describe, I guess, three main themes. One is the sort of overall NetBox ecosystem, as we call it. And I'm going to talk about specific projects within that system. Mainly, we have what we call the crowd crawler plugin that talks to public clouds. And then the most recent thing I've worked on is what I would call an IPMI crawler. So the purpose of that is to, sorry if you can see my pointer over here. This would be kind of a almost real-time hardware inventory of a data center that is also sort of self-maintaining. But what you'll see here is I've got NetBox at the bottom, and any end user can hit that via the GUI, but it's 99% of its usage is really the REST API. And then the concept that Danko came up with was what we call a crawler. But basically the most traditional one that most people are familiar with is we want to go out and scan the network for, basic, traditional devices like switches and access points, routers, firewalls, that sort of thing. So that's not really part of NetBox in our current scheme. We actually have standalone GitLab runners. But the pattern that they typically follow is they download a list of a certain object type, say it's routers or switches, from NetBox, and then the crawler goes out and scans the network for those type of devices, and then any changes or newly discovered objects, it then pushes back in the NetBox. That's the pattern of what we call a crawler. You'll see that we traditionally have a crawler for each type of asset. You'll see here, so traditional crawler would hit conventional standalone switches. SDN crawler was typically hitting SDN controllers, so that might be tens or hundreds of switches per controller. Of course, Nutanix main product, right, is a hypervisor, and the management plane of that product is called Prism. So it also crawls the Nutanix Prism instances on the network. Again, all these get that list all of these obtain that initial list of things to scan from NetBox. So the major project that we had going last year was a cloud crawler, which I can show you more detail. Basically, we are able to inventory most of the assets within the 3 primary cloud providers. And the next thing that I'm adding is the ability to do a real-time or maybe semi-real-time inventory of Nutanix data centers. And that's at significant scale. So, in the cloud crawlers, we're up to, hundreds of thousands of VMs. And then on the hardware side, we're in the, tens of thousands. So the key thing here is that NetBox is the source of truth for all automation within our company now. That's how I view it. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on the cloud plugin. So a key part of that, I have a separate screenshot. Let me apologize at the beginning here. I'm a bit confined here in my ability to show you a live demo. That's what I'd really like to do, but I can't do that because every screen in NetBox would basically reveal something about the company's internal infrastructure. I kind of lack the ability at the moment to create a fully functional demo site with fake data. That's something I still need to do. I really can't show you the live system. That would be the most powerful, of course. But again, this is getting a bit ridiculous, but this is some screenshots from our live NetBox. But I basically want to show you that we've broken the clouds into a hierarchy, kind of starting with the most top level object, right? Going from the actual platform, which today is AWS, GCP, and Azure, and then individual accounts, and then VPCs or the equivalent. And then we're a networking team, so the subnets and address space is obviously something we're hugely interested in. Like, how do we manage cloud address space at the same time as on-prem? And then we've really concentrated on the VM as the object we want to inventory carefully. And then under VMs, there's VM components such as interfaces. And resource groups refers to Azure resource groups. That's specific to that particular cloud. And hopefully everybody can see this, but this is a highly redacted, to the point of being ridiculous, screen from NetBox. But basically what the major takeaway I want you to give here is that, we've kind of color-coded the tagging here. And then, so, orange, this aqua blue, and green represent assets from all 3 cloud providers, but all visible in a single sort of pane of glass in NetBox. So I think that's a fairly unique capability. So we can do searching and any kind of reporting or that's across all 3 clouds at one time. And if you look at it on the even bigger view, we can actually search across all 3 clouds, Nutanix private clouds under the Nutanix product, and also on-prem hardware assets. We can search across all those simultaneously. So that's a pretty powerful functionality, right? Someone may only know some very little bit of like a portion of a host name or a portion of an account number or maybe it's just an IP address, right? So, but that's extremely useful, powerful. You think about it, that they can just search for that fragmentary information and get results from any of those resources. That's probably that's probably the killer app of this sort of thing. I'm just closing windows so I can actually see what I'm talking about. Let's see. We've spent a lot of time kind of normalizing cloud-specific terminology. So that's kind of a challenge when you're working across these clouds. Like a similar functionality has a different name. Since we did AWS first, that was we kind of settled on their naming scheme and tried to figure out what's the equivalent of that on another cloud platform. So an example might be something like a VPC, which is called the best analogy I think is a VNet under Azure or network under GCP. So we've normalized the terminology in our displays here, so we don't have to be cloud specific when we're looking for a specific asset. So, as I mentioned, multi-cloud search is probably our biggest use case there. But if you tie this down to like very specific examples, right? Like the security team gets a report that, from an external person saying, hey, this IP address within your cloud or on-prem is DDoSing us or something like that, right? The security team would kind of jump on there and say, like, what do they have to do? Is they have to find the owner of that asset, right? It could be a VM or a physical machine, and then that's where this really, all they have is the external IP, and they finally want to end up with the name of a person to contact, and kind of a throat to choke, right? To shut down that problem. So that's incredible asset for the company to be able to do that. Like, you think of what's the alternative, or it's really, it would have to be looking through all those separate cloud consoles and then through our own management system to look for both on-prem and also our own private cloud. And then from a networking point of view, this is huge ability to know what address space is being used within the cloud, right? I don't know how most people do it, but we found that the pioneers were people kind of doing this shadow IT, right? They went out, they had something was slow to happen for them on-prem, so they used the cloud, paid with their own credit card, right? And we're way past that, right? We've got master accounts, everybody's organized and using an official account. But the cost of that was everybody just set up their own address space, right? So, and it's total chaos address space wise. So that's incredible use of NetBox to be able to kind of get a grasp of what address space is out there. Imagine we're trying to create IPsec tunnels between on-prem and the cloud. That comes in extremely handy because you have to know kind of what both ends are like. I'm going to jump over here to this DC inventory project. So this is, switching gears. This is a completely different sort of thing. This is all physical assets within a data center. And right now, the previous state was that people had to manually enter data as they entered, put equipment, provision servers within the physical, in the data center. So they were hand entering data, say, serial numbers and rack locations, rack elevations, all that sort of information. So that was extremely error prone and time consuming. Again, this is at the scale of tens of thousands of these physical servers. So
Eric, just to check real
yes,
quick.
sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you intending to share something else?
Yes.
Transitioning? Okay.
Sorry. Let's see. Actually, I want to tell you a little about this is the typical Nutanix server. And the key takeaway here is that there's a physical metal box, right, that has a number of bays in it, and the physical servers go into those bays. So this leads to two types of capacity that we're interested in. So there's the, vertical U measurement, right? How much of a rack we're using. And then there's also, is every bay within that physical server populated, right? So that's another type of capacity. And what I wanted to do was be able to automatically determine that. Humans wouldn't have to track this. We'd always have current state of how much of the rack vertical, the vertical space is used, or how many of the bays are occupied, and what are the attributes of those servers within there. So that's kind of the project I've been working on most recently. There's no big secret here. How I did this is the data center team is very systematic about what interfaces they plug the IPMI ports in, and that directly allows us to determine the rack elevation. So if you're looking at a rack here, we know we can, via automation, we can determine, that particular server is in this rack and row based on the switch. It's, the name of the switch it's plugged into, but the unknown was what's the elevation of that piece of equipment within that rack. And the way we're using that is we just very systematically plug in the IPMI port. So, the server at location U1 is plugged into IPMI port 1 on that corresponding switch. So that whole, physical location in X, Y, 3 dimensions is fully automated for the equipment. And, I'm also using the IPMI port, so I actually don't care about what OS is installed on there. But 99% of the cases, that's the Nutanix hypervisor. It's called AHV that's installed there, but it doesn't matter if that's VMware or Hyper-V. And it could even be an unprovisioned box that has no OS on it at all. That's another possibility. It could even be turned off. I don't care, because I'm hitting it via the IPMI interface that's always on. And then from the IPMI interface, I can get all sorts of details about the box, about the serial number of the chassis, model numbers, RAM, CPU, all those, and we supplement that with things like owner and group. So we can do something we're doing right now is we're upgrading entire rows within our data center, going from an older generation of switches to new ones. And what we can do is then generate a list of people that we're going to be affecting by that outage, since we have the owner and team for every device in that row. So we can all do all sorts of complex planning without over notifying people or under notifying them. And the cool thing is, again, NetBox is, if I go back to the original cloud, this NetBox knows about all the hardware. So this crawler here kicks off once a day, downloads a list of all the hardware, scans all of it, and then pushes back, any changes that it sees. The absence of something, or the presence of a new server, or someone swapped out one of those individual bays and the serial number changed, that sort of thing. So it's basically a self-maintaining data center inventory. And I've written up extensively how I did that and published that on LinkedIn if you want more information on that. But just, so the real users of this information, obviously the data center team that saved them, from manual data entry and the resulting errors, and it's enabled, easy capacity management for the data center. And the major implications of that, we can do stuff like hardware lifecycle management. You can say, oh, this series of hardware is, become EOL in 6 months. So we need to budget for, replacing all that stuff. And that's, millions of dollars. So that's and that once you get in that dollar amount, right, there's plenty of audience within the company for that data. We can also do sort of impact analysis, like I mentioned, having the owner and team and physical location. We can say, taking down the switch or this unplanned outage will affect these people or these applications. But I don't want to oversell it. It's not a monitoring system. This is not real time. If someone pulls out the plug on something, it's not going to, alert you to that. I guess that may change. I was hearing about your new features. I guess people could subscribe to their own devices, right, and potentially be notified if something changed on them. And I would happily take more questions on this. I think that's almost my time, I believe. That's correct. I don't know if,
Thank you.
sure.
We did have a couple questions coming through the chat.
Okay.
I know Danko had provided some answers there in the chat, but I think they only went to the panelists. So let me read these off. Sorry, I'm trying to go back to the first one. So Brian Ward had asked, he says, so it sounds like you're not initiating provisioning from NetBox, but rather collecting data about systems that you've already set up and then just stashing data about them in NetBox. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
Yes, that's the stage we're at. Yeah, we're not. We do use NetBox to actually provision things, but not these particular ones you see here. I don't know if I didn't really explain it, but there's some kind of manual scripting we have on the right here, and then so there's things that go out and optimize firewall rules, right? And then that actually potentially could actually the SDN network we can actually provision from NetBox. That not in the hardware field yet. No.
Okay. The next question was from Elliot, who asks, What happens when the crawler discovers a new server whose device type hasn't yet been modeled in NetBox?
We don't right now, to be honest, that's not handled automatically because I've done extensive scanning, so I feel like I know. I mean, there shouldn't be, in theory, the data center is this hermetically sealed thing, right? We shouldn't have random stuff showing up, but the way it can handle new hardware showing up on the network, since it's it's asking the SDN controllers, show me all your endpoints, and if something isn't already known. But I feel like we can automate that. No, I have not had to deal with that particular case, but I think we could deal with it, throw it in sort of a generic bucket, and then alert people to that hey, we found some new kind of hardware out there.
And
Yeah,
I can jump in for the
sure.
cloud side, because I think maybe the question was also a bit on the
Oh, okay.
cloud side. On the cloud side, the situation is more clear. The VM types are more regular, but as we do the discovery phase from cloud, we have enough information at that time to determine if such a VM type already exists in NetBox. And if it doesn't, we can create a new one. We have the data at that moment for things like number of CPUs, memory, and so on. And we would create it on the fly, use it on that object, and then we can reference it also for any other object that uses the same VM instance type.
And I was an add on to that. Now that you're talking about the cloud again, I'm sorry, I was stuck off in hardware world. But so this actually happened. We were experimenting. So Nutanix has its own way to. It's called NC2, but basically it's the ability to run Nutanix clusters within the cloud providers using bare metal VMs. And the situation I encountered was that there was new experimental types of bare metal VMs coming out of Azure, right? So that weren't in their normal, didn't have a SKU in the normal place, So we actually encountered that case where a brand new VM type popped out that we'd never seen before. And then we were able to, as long as we're able to read the basics about that VM, right? It's, CPU details and RAM and disk and all that. That's something that is accommodated within the cloud world.
Okay, thank you. Andrew asks, are the crawlers being used off the shelf or in-house products?
I think everything we've written ourselves, they're just Python, basically GitLab runners, right? And like underneath it's, it's Kubernetes, but that's basically the technology is that there's, scheduled runners that kick off once a day typically. And we try to spread it out over those 24 hours, which some are extremely resource intensive to crawl the network, right? It might take hours to crawl the cloud. The cloud is so dynamic that we have this problem that something may be created and deleted like while we're scanning it. And it has to be very robust code and ignore kind of half created resources in the cloud. I've even had the case where I don't know if you've seen this, but Azure is very particular, and it seems to, even if you deprovision or try to delete something, it keeps it around for weeks or months. It's kind of bizarre behavior, but it's like I encounter a lot of, depreciated. I have to make sure that it's marked as active before we try to inventory it. That's a major challenge.
Okay. We had a second question from Andrew, who says, I see ServiceNow listed. Could you speak a bit to the relationship between NetBox and ServiceNow? I'm trying to justify NetBox being our source of truth for network devices / changes, but get a lot of pushback internally because ServiceNow can quote unquote do everything.
Exactly the same situation here, and we try to avoid those battles by not claiming that NetBox is a CMDB. ServiceNow is the official CMDB, and it uses NetBox as a source of data to build its CMDB. But we're not, we're trying to avoid that kind of proprietary problems within the company by just confining its role a bit. But it's certainly a very good source for ServiceNow. ServiceNow could be pulling from 20 different other systems to get I don't know what it is from to build CMDB tables for and CIs for things like objects like laptops, things like that are totally out of the scope of a NetBox. but it does, it's mainly a one-way copy from NetBox to ServiceNow at the moment.
Makes a lot of sense. We had Brian Ward had a question as well. Does Nutanix plan to share any of this with your customers or provide it as open source? The Prism crawler sounds like it could be useful for teams who use both Nutanix and NetBox.
Definitely, we'd like to pursue that. We haven't done it formally, but and that's why I was kind of apologizing there. It's like I can't offer this back for the community at the moment, nor can I show you it live in action. I'd like to do both. That'd be a much more powerful demo, and we've gained so much within the company for free. Essentially, that's part of our sales pitch to other teams within the company that are paying sort of a per asset fee for their whatever system, monitoring system or something like that they've purchased. And we say, hey, look, I mean, obviously it's not completely free, and it obviously, people have to pay for developer salaries to work on it, but that's still quite favorable compared to most commercial systems. So we would like to give it back, and I think people would, it'd be great to have a community improving the code that we've written. So I'm all for that. We do have to clear all these internal legal hurdles and that sort of thing to move forward to that, though. We haven't started that. Yeah, so we'd like to.
To second Eric, yeah, absolutely. Both on the cloud plugin as well as there is a crawler that goes with the plugin as well, and the Nutanix Prism crawler. More things we can get to the community, the better. So one of our initial visions when we were creating the cloud plugin was let us get it through the door, share it with the community, and if the model sticks, it would be ideally for us that the community maintains it, and maybe in the end it ends up in the NetBox. That's like a win-win for everybody, less maintenance on our side, and ability for people to use it very easily.
Yeah, I can tell you from my perspective, certainly there's a lot of demand for cloud integration, and it's something that's been on our roadmap for some time, a very high level roadmap for NetBox. And obviously, it's kind of a given that it would have to be implemented in the form of a plugin. And we had gone back and forth. So this is leading to a question. We had gone back and forth about, would it make sense to do all in one, as which seems to be the approach you've taken, or like do individual plugins for like here's an AWS plugin, here's an Azure plugin, here's a Google.
But we had the same question at the beginning of development, and it's a question
guys...
that defines your approach. And we just said, okay, let's start simple, and if we need, we'll branch it out. At the end, we didn't branch it out, but this doesn't allow all of the cloud to fully model all resource types, but allows an easy entry into this to collect at least the network-related portions of all of the cloud aspects.
Yeah,
okay, so, go ahead.
I was just saying there's no limit of other things that we could gather from the cloud, right? I mean, the whole purpose that I started with was to find out about sort of IPsec VPNs between on-prem and cloud providers, and that's like that would be a very logical. I actually have the code to do that. We just need to add the model, but that's something of high interest to network engineers, obviously, right? It's like, what's the address space on both ends, and what are the what do those connections look like? You can even have tunnels between cloud providers, and then we can look at it from both ends, right? It's pretty cool stuff.
Very cool. We had another question come in from Eric, who asks, with devices, this seems parallel to what Diode is doing, right? Read a device and update the documentation based on what you see. What are the possibilities of a Napalm driver for each cloud provider?
I just don't have the experience to answer that. I mean, I just read about Diode last week. So it was I don't know enough.
Yeah, I think it does play in that same the same arena, or around the theme of like discovery and inventory kind of stuff. But beyond that, we'd have to look at the details, I think, of both solutions. But I think you're on the right track there. Your second question was, what are the possibilities of a Napalm driver for each cloud provider? That's an interesting question as well.
I'm not qualified to answer. I don't know. I guess I was. Go ahead.
On my side, I haven't worked with Napalm in a way, just as a user, never as somebody to program it.
I think your original question, like, should we do a per cloud plugin is interesting, right? Like, say we want to add Oracle or something else, Oracle Cloud or something else in there. How much incremental work is that to go back and change our code? I mean, I can tell you as a developer, it's pretty complex to kind of be live on, developing for 3 different cloud providers at the simultaneously is what you sort of need to do for right now. If you do it in one, you kind of have to figure out how to equivalent to do it, and then in another cloud provider, and that's challenging. So every one of those you'd add, it's almost exponential growth complexity.
Yeah, it's one of the paradigms that I've come to realize, at least with cloud providers versus the physical world. And when you're modeling things in the physical world, everything's very easy to define because you can see it, you can touch it, you can hold it, right? And this is saying, oh, this is what a server is. It's a block of metal and it goes into a rack, which is a bigger block of metal. And it's very easy to understand that. And everyone kind of has to play by the same rules, right? Like if you're selling a rack mount device, it's going to go probably into a 19-inch wide equipment rack, and that much has been standardized. And we know then you then plug a standardized Ethernet cable into it, right? And all that has been well established. Now, when you get into the cloud realm, it's kind of free reign, right? Like there are a lot of very, very similar yet divergent or products from different providers, right? And of course they all use different terminology, and they might be 99% similar, but then you'll inevitably come up, there's a bit of nuance that has to be accounted for, and it doesn't work exactly, it doesn't quite fit into that same model. It's kind of like using I guess the best analogy is if you've ever tried to use a metric socket to turn an imperial sized bolt. Like
Right.
it kind of fits, right? But
Right.
it's not quite there. And
I was thinking of 2 examples of problems there. One is like typically when you're doing inventory of a cloud, there's multiple ways to do that. You can kind of ask the cloud what devices you have and iterate through them. You can say, show me all the VMs and iterate through them, and then show me all the interfaces. Or you can do this hierarchical thing where you kind of start at the top, again, like the hierarchy we have today, start at the account level and work down. So we had to rewrite the GCP code basically because we found out that one API had a cap on the usage, or else you were charged thousands of dollars to raise that cap, things like that. So we had to change our approach completely to avoid that monetary penalty to get the same information. Another example would be so Nutanix again has this cluster product that runs on bare metal VMs, and if you're a cloud administrator, you have no visibility into what's running on that cluster, right? It's sort of like nesting. It's a whole other level of virtualization. So, I kind of have to hit the problem from both ends simultaneously. I have to come in through the Nutanix Prism API and also the cloud API coming through the kind of the back end. They both have different views of them and try to reconcile that so it can show, so the an AWS administrator has no idea what's running in the Nutanix cluster. The Nutanix administrator potentially has very little idea what the cloud infrastructure is behind that cluster. So that's an interesting area I've worked on quite a bit, is like how to, make the data about what's running on that visible to both audiences.
Right. Very, very cool stuff. I'm definitely interested in continuing the conversation with you about open sourcing that cloud plugin potentially. So
sure, yeah,
we'll circle back on that. Yeah. All right. Well, Eric, Danko, thank you both very much for your time today. It was great. A lot of good stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to the deck here, I think. All right. Great. So if you're on the call today and you are listening to this after the fact and you'd like to present something cool that you've worked on as well, let us know. By all means, reach out. You can contact us either through email, or I think we have great. Maggie just dropped a link in the chat as well. Sign up. Just let us know what you want to talk about. We'll try to get you scheduled. We've been doing this monthly, and our next call has been scheduled for Tuesday, August the 27th. That'll be at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, not actually Standard Time. Bit of a pet peeve of mine, but that's all right. So we hope to see you all again there. With that said, that'll wrap up today's meeting. If you have other questions or anything else you'd like to discuss after the fact, we'll go ahead and turn off the recording. You're all welcome to stick around for a while and chat too. All right. Thank you, everyone.